Hello everyone, we've come a long way in our Django REST framework tutorial, which is almost ready to deploy. There are just a couple of things we need to sort out, and one of them is that our application depends on football player data, and we need a way to automatically update our player database. There's a couple of ways we can do this, but I prefer to use Celery. Celery is a task queue system that you can use to run asynchronous tasks or schedule automated jobs. For that reason, we can use it to schedule periodic updates to our player database. Apart from running scheduled tasks, Celery can be used to run time-intensive tasks in the background. This will allow your user to interact with your web app as the background task is running in the background. For example, Instagram has recently added a feature that allows users to download Reels. As a user downloads the Reels, they can continue watching other Reels. They are probably using a task queue system such as Celery to download the reel in the background, so that the whole web application doesn't freeze as the download is happening. So this is the other benefit of Celery, but in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to schedule automated tasks using Celery. To get started, you will need to install Celery, and you can do that using pip. I think mine is already installed, and Celery requires a message broker to communicate with Django. There are two main brokers out there, that is Redis and RabbitMQ. For this tutorial, we'll use Redis, which we'll install using pip. You'll also need to install a Redis server, and if you're on Linux, you can use apt. If you're on Mac, you can use Brew. I haven't mentioned Windows because Celery stopped supporting Windows at version 4. Finally, you can test if your Redis server is running correctly by running Redis CLI, that is the command line utility, and by typing ping, you should return POM. So I can now start setting up Celery, and we are going to use the official documentation to get started. I strongly recommend that you go through the documentation on your own time. It will help you follow along, and it will help you in other projects. So in our main project, which is backend, we are going to start by creating our first Celery app. So we'll create a new file, and we're going to call it celery.py, and this is where we'll have our app configurations. So I'm going to copy this from the official documentation just to help us get started, and we'll customize it to reflect our project. So the first line tells Celery to look for its settings from the Django settings. So we can replace this with our project, which is backend. So that should be backend.settings. Then we're going to have our app, which we can replace it by our project name, which is backend. Then we have our app.config from object, which simply tells Celery to get its settings from Django. And because Celery needs a way to differentiate Django settings and Celery settings, we specify the namespace. That means that every Celery settings should be prefixed by the word Celery. For example, we can have these settings. So in our settings file, the first one will be the broker URL, which is our message broker, and we'll also have our time zones. We also have these settings, the result backend settings, that will tell Celery to store its task result in our DjangoDB. That way we can easily monitor the status of our Django tasks. To implement this, we are going to need a third-party app, and we are going to install it using pip. That is the Django Celery results application. Mine is already installed. After installing it, we are going to need to register it in our installed apps. It's a third-party app. After registering it, we can make our migrations. That will create the table to manage our tasks. The final setting, the auto-discover task, tells Celery to look for the tasks in our registered applications. So it's going to look for tasks in our players apps and our users app. The task will be hosted in files called task.py file. So you can see this in the documentation. So app 1, in our case, that will be players. App 2 will be our users application. And you can see the explanation over there. So again, I strongly recommend that you go through this documentation in your own time. The final bit, this is just a custom task. We won't need it, so we can remove it. So I'm just going to comment that out. Then the final step is to make sure that our Celery application is loaded when Django starts. And we can do this by importing our application in the init file. So we are going to import this. So from current directory.celery, we are going to import our app, our Celery app, and we can register it in all our apps in this format. So we'll have it in a variable called all and register our Celery app. This will be equals to a tuple, and here we'll pass our Celery app. And remember the comma because it's a tuple. And again, I get this from the official documentation. So if you have the time, take a look. And after that, we can start defining our tasks in our applications. So in our players application, we are going to create the first task. It will be hosted in a file called tasks. So create a new file. It will be tasks.py. And here we are going to create two tasks. One of them will be responsible for counting all our player objects, and the main task, which is the aim of this video, will be the one responsible for updating our player database. The first one is going to be called count players. The second one, update players from JSON. These are just regular functions, so we can write them as regular functions. So def count players. Then I'll just pass for now because we need to import our players model. So that's from current directory.models import player. So we'll define the count variable. We'll have our count variable, and this will be equal to player.objects.count. So we can just return this in an f string that will have number of players and our variable count. So our function is complete. We just need a way to tell Celery that this is a shared task. And to do that, we are going to use the share task decorator, and that's from Celery. So we can import that from Celery, import shared tasks, then finally decorate our function so that Celery will be able to recognize it. So we can check if this has worked in our terminal. So you're going to run this task using Celery, pass the A flag, then specify our project name, which is backend, then use the worker keyword, then pass the L flag, which is for log, and you're going to specify info. So this will provide verbose logs as our Celery tasks get executed. So you can see that it has discovered our count players task, and it has also connected to our Redis server. But you'll notice that it hasn't executed our count players task. For now, we are going to have to execute it manually. In a few minutes, I'll show you how we can automatically execute it. So in a new tab, we are going to go to the Django shell. So Python manage.py shell. Then we can import the task. So from players, no task, import count players. Finally, we can execute it using this command, count.players.delay. And you can see that it returns an asynchronous result. If we check our logs, you'll notice that it has printed it, succeeded in that time, and it has returned our object that we specified. So you can see the number of objects in our players database. So let's see how we can schedule to run this automatically. But for now, let's just close this. You can do this using Ctrl+C. So to schedule automated tasks, we are going to need another third-party application, and that is the Django Celery bit, and we are going to install it using pip. So pip install Django Celery bit. Mine is already installed. After installing it, we are going to need to register it in our registered applications. So in our third-party apps, we are going to add the Django Celery bit app. So Django Celery bit, and always remember the comma. After registering the Django Celery bit, we'll need to add one more Celery setting that will enable us to add tasks from the admin page, and that is the Celery bit scheduler setting, and we'll set it to Django Celery bit schedulers database schedulers. And after that, we can make our migrations to create our tasks table. So python manage.py migrate, so that will create our tables in the database, and we'll be able to monitor our tasks from the Django admin page. So to schedule our apps in our Celery app, we're going to need to add a new configuration. So that's in app.conf.bitschedule, and that should be equals to a dictionary. The first key will be the name of our task schedule. So we are going to call it count players every 30 seconds. The value will contain two keys, that is the task and schedule. We're going to leave this empty for now. The task will be equals to our task, so that's under players.tasks, and the name of our task, which is count players, and we want to schedule it to run every 30 seconds. So we are going to execute our Celery worker the same way we did before. The command will be very similar. We're just going to add one more flag, which is the bit flag, and that will execute our task at the schedule times. So it will run every 30 seconds. There you can see the first one has run, and the second one should run in just right about now, and there it is. So it's going to run this every 30 seconds consistently until we stop it. So I'm going to stop it for now so that we can create our main task. So this will be responsible for updating our players object. So def update players from JSON. We can pass, then decorate it using the share task decorator. And this task will be very similar to the management command we created in an earlier video, where we wrote a custom command to populate our players database. So it's going to be very similar to this, but with a minor adjustment. So at the moment the file path is fixed, and this can pose challenges, especially when you are deploying it to a server. So I want it to be relative to our root project directory, and luckily Django comes with this in its settings, the base directory settings. So we can just copy this, paste it in our update players from JSON. We can fix the indentations. So we can import the datetime module, and also we need to import JSON. From datetime, import datetime, and finally import JSON. We don't need to do much, but change this into player.objects.update or create. That just means that Django will create a new object if it doesn't exist, or update the existing objects. We are going to use the ID field as our identifier, ID, and finally we are going to set the defaults to our player objects. I'm just going to remove this pass date and make it a global function. So I'll have it here and fix the indentations. So we are going to have this path as JSON file path, and we want to build a relative file path with our root project directory. And luckily Django has this in its settings as base dir, and we can get it from Django settings. So we can import that from Django.configurations or conf import settings, and we're also going to need the OS module to build this path. So import OS. So the file path will be equals to os.path.join. We are going to join our base directory and our JSON file. So that's settings dot base directory, and we want to join using our player data.json file. I recently ran my web scraper that updates this data, and I generated this file. So it's about 12 players. I'm going to share it with you guys. It will be in my GitHub repo, and I also have a link to it in the description. We can now replace this with our new relative file. So JSON file path. This is important as we don't want to use our local file path when you are deploying this application to a server. So our task is almost ready. I'm just going to have this in a try block. So try, then have this in a try block. Except exception as E, so that in case of anything we can get the exception. So we can return an error message that says error updating players, and finally add our exception. And if it runs correctly, we are going to return a positive message that says success, player objects updated. Before we wind up, I'm going to share a pro tip, and we are going to that is having this loop in a context block, and that will ensure that if our update operation fails for any reason, Django will be able to roll back our database. To do that, we are going to need to import transaction from DjangoDB. So from django.db import transaction, we are going to need to use the atomic transaction. So with, we'll have this in a context block. So with transaction.atomic, let me just fix the indentation. And with that, our function is ready, or task. We just need to add it in our schedule. So in the celery.py file where we have our schedule, we are going to create a new schedule, which will be very similar to the above. So we can just copy it and rename our task. For now, I'm just going to have it as update players every day. Then specify the task, which will be players.task, and that will be update players from JSON. As for the schedule, I'm going to share another pro tip, and that is by using the cron tab. Luckily, Celery comes with that setting. So as opposed to setting a rote seconds as we did before, we can set a relative time of the hour, the minute, the day, or the month. And we can import this from Celery. So that's from celery.schedules import cron tab. And we can use this function to create our cron schedule. So for now, we are going to have the hour and the minute. When deploying, we are going to set a more robust cron tab. For example, I can set a cron tab to update this player database every week or every day. I can also set the time. So for testing purposes, let me just get the hour. The current hour is 8, and we can set the minute to minute 13. So the hour will be 8 and the minute will be 13. So we can stop this and run it again so that we can be able to see the changes. So the moment is 8:12. So when it hits 8:13, it's going to update our database. You can see that it has discovered our new task, update players from JSON. And yeah, at exactly 8:13 it ran and updated our players. You can see the log, success, player objects updated. So I also mentioned that we will be able to inspect this task in our admin page. So you can see we have our periodic tasks, our Celery results, and the rest of our database info. You can see the scheduled tasks we have scheduled. Update players every day, count players every 30 seconds. So I think that's it for this video. We've seen how you can integrate Celery with Django, and how you can create automated schedules within Celery Bit. This can be used in various ways. For example, you can use it to send automated emails, or in our case, make database updates or make backups to your database. So if you found this video useful, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for similar content. See you in the next one. Thank you for watching.